So let me begin with a small story. This is a little story about three people: somebody, nobody, anybody, and everybody. But let me read it for you. There was an important job somebody had to do, and it was everybody's job to make sure it got done. Anybody could have done it, but everybody thought somebody was doing it. So in the end, nobody did it. Everybody got angry when nobody did what somebody was supposed to have done. Everybody thought anybody could do it, but nobody realized that anybody wasn't doing it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. Unfortunately, this is often our reality. Everybody blames somebody when nobody does what anybody could or should have done. And this is even more real and disastrous when we talk about protecting children from harm and violence. So for a while together, we will try to answer three questions. First question: why is it our responsibility as a church, as a ministry, to protect children? Our second question will be: what is exactly child protection, child safeguarding? And our third question will be: how can we, as a church, as a ministry, fulfill this responsibility to protect children from harm and violence? So let's try to answer our first question. Why is it the responsibility of the church, of every children ministry, to protect children in our midst? And how better answer this question by looking at God's heart for children that are suffering. For a moment, I would like you to prayerfully read a story in the Bible, the story of Ismail. In Genesis 21, verse 14 till 21. And while you are reading, I would like you to focus on two questions. How is God's heart reflected in here? And the second question: what is God asking of us, caretakers? Take time to read this story prayerfully and to really look at God's heart in this story. So a few points that we can see from this story. First, we can see that God hears Ismail crying. Yes, even today, we can be sure that God hears the children crying. He wants to respond to those cries. Second point we see here, God is asking Hagar, what is the matter? Even today, God is also asking his church. God is also asking us, why are children crying? Then we see another point. We see that God is encouraging Hagar to take care of her son. Even today, God is encouraging us. God is giving us everything that we need to take care of the children that are suffering. And last point, we see that God gives promises to Ismail. Even today, God is giving promises to children. Isn't it encouraging to look at God's heart? Isn't it a call for us to be the way that God is with children, the way that God is feeling toward children? So we can be sure that when we are protecting children, we are acting following God's heart. But in the Bible, we not only find the heart of God for children, we also find a call for us. And let me read to you Psalm 82. In Psalm 82, we have this call from God. Defend the weak and the fatherless. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. So isn't it important for us to take this call seriously? Rescue, defend, deliver. So how can we answer this call? One way to do this is first to take care of the children that God has entrusted us with in our families, in our churches, and in our ministry. And we can do this through child safeguarding. But what does that mean exactly, child safeguarding? Let me read a definition that can help us to better understand. Child safeguarding is the responsibility that organizations, churches, have to make sure their staff, operations or activities, and programs do no harm to children, that they do not expose children to the risk of harm and abuse, and that any concerns the organization has about children's safety are reported to the appropriate authorities or agencies. In other words, that means that in our ministry, in our churches, we need to make sure that the way we are doing ministry is not harming children. And this can be done through establishing processes and good practices to prevent abuse and respond to abuse. So let's see first the prevention part, how to prevent abuse in the midst of the ministry, in our churches. But before to go into prevention, it is important first to understand what abuse is, what abuse means, and the impact it has on children. Defining abuse is not an easy task. Indeed, it is essential to understand that culture has a tremendous role in the forms that children's practices take in different contexts, in different societies, in different cultures. Just like any society has its values and norms in relations to children, to childhood, also the understanding of what constitutes abuse, maltreatment, neglect varies from one society to another. But even more, we also all use our own personal experiences, our own personal values and attitudes when it comes to making judgment about what is an abusive situation. So sometimes defining abuse can become a little bit confusing. What may seem to be abusive for someone or in a certain context may be acceptable in another context for someone else. So to this end, I would like to look together to a definition which is used internationally. It's a definition that is being written by the World Health Organization. So let's read it and then we will look at it closely. Child maltreatment is all forms of physical or emotional ill treatment, sexual abuse, neglect or negligent treatment, or commercial or other exploitation, resulting in actual or potential harm to the child's health, survival, development, or dignity in the context of a relationship of responsibility, trust, or power. So 3 points that we may highlight from this definition. First, what we see in this definition is that violence against children can take different forms. It can be physical abuse, emotional, including spiritual abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, exploitation, being commercial or sexual exploitation, even trafficking, and even peer-to-peer abuse. Then we see also the context in which abuse can occur. And we see that it's in a relationship of trust, someone you trust. It can be in a relationship of responsibility, for example, a teacher or a spiritual leader. And it can also be in a relationship of power. That's why also peer-to-peer abuse fits within this definition. A child can take power over other children and begin to abuse them. And finally, the last point. In this definition, it's really important because this will help you a lot in defining exactly which situation can be called abuse or not. And this is on the impact that abuse can have on children. And here we see that the impact can be immediate, or the impact can be in the long term. And we can also see that the impact or child abuse can impair the child's health, even survival. It can impact the child development, and it can also impact the dignity of the child. I would like to illustrate for you shortly the impact that child abuse has on children. So let me illustrate the impact of child abuse with you. So let's imagine that this paper, white paper, is a child. And let's imagine that abuse happens in his life. Now may I ask you to take this in its original state, so we may try. We may try our best. But what we see is that we still will have impact. We can still see what abuse has done. It's the same with children. Children's souls are like wet cement. Child abuse that occurs in their early lives can have an imprint that hardens. Though a child's injury may be hidden, child abuse can have immediate or long-lasting impact. And it can have impact in all realms of the child's well-being. That means emotional, social, physical, cognitive, and spiritual. However, not every child will display the impact of maltreatment, and not every adult will experience the long-term consequences of their traumatic childhood experience because of resilience. But all are at increased risks. Therefore, it is really crucial that we make all efforts that we can to prevent abuse from occurring. And one way to do so is in our ministry to have written policies, written procedures on child safeguarding. A child safeguarding policy will provide guidelines for preventing abuse and for dealing with issues of abuse. So I would like to give you some advices on, in your context, how to develop a child safeguarding policies with clear guidance, clear procedures that are relevant to your own country. And to do so, in your own context, it would be important to begin first with an assessment, trying to assess, to map what are the risks that children are exposed to in your churches, in your ministries. And those risks can arise from people that surround the children. Those risks can arise from way you are conducting interventions, activities with or for children. And risks can arise from ways you are using media and communication in and for your ministry. So it is important for you to understand first what are the risks, and then you will be able to develop procedures, to put in place relevant procedure in those three domains: people, activities interventions, and media. So let me give you a few examples how you can do this. For example, in the domain of media, make sure that the child's safety will not be compromised when you take a picture. No identification on social media. We know that maybe volunteers, staff, would love to put photos on Facebook, but we need to make sure that especially vulnerable teachers will not be a target. So this is something important that you can put in your policies. Regarding activities, make sure that supervision level is appropriate to the age of the children you have, to the size group that you have, and to the nature or the location of your activities. These are only examples. They are not exhaustive. You will need by yourself to work on it. But something more important is regarding people. We know that people can be a source of risks for our children. Yes, we want to believe that people that are serving with us are trustworthy. We want to believe that they are coming for the same purpose as us. We want to believe they want the best for the children. But we need to be aware that some people may have not that much good intention. They may have bad intentions. So it is important to put in place safe recruitment procedures. They will act as a safety net. But it is important yet to state that no one check is sufficient. So it is important to be sure and to know who you are hiring, who you are accepting as a volunteer, as a visitor, to make sure that the children in your activities, in your ministries, are safe. And also something else that is important. We need to understand that not all the people coming to work with children knows how to treat children well. So it is important to be able for yourself to build a code of conduct for your staff, your people, to understand what you want them to do and especially what you want them not to do. So this may go from making sure they will always work in an open environment, avoiding private situations where they are alone with a child. Or it can go to never behave physically in a manner which is inappropriate or sexually provocative. In any case, if you would like to develop your own policy or review it, you can use for this process a lot of resources available on different websites. But you can especially go to the website keepingchildrensafe.global. So we have just looked at preventing abuse through first understanding or building a common understanding of abuse. And we have also quickly looked at how to develop a child safeguarding policy. But what about responding to abuse? Without entering into interventions with children at risk, it is important to highlight that a child safeguarding policy will be complete only if there is a clear guidance also on how and when to report abuse. So it is important to highlight that if someone has formed a reasonable belief that a child has suffered or is likely to suffer significant harm as a result of abuse or neglect, he must know how to notify, who to notify. Indeed, keeping silence is not an option. The cycle of abuse needs to be broken by any means. And I would quote Martin Luther King Jr.'s, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." Yes, we need to stop abuse. We need to stop being silent about abuse. But then your staff, your volunteers needs to know how to stop abuse, who to report to, when to report to. So in your policy, it is important that you answer those questions. Who should be told? And where can I refer a child? For sure, in the second steps, a strategy for addressing the identified issues, a strategy to further protect the child should be developed. But this is another thematics. And I will refer you to other modules like children at risk or trauma care modules. So I hope that through this short video, you have begun to answer for yourself to the questions we had in the beginning. Why is this a responsibility for the church or for our own ministry to protect children? I hope you know better now, you understand better what is child safeguarding. And I hope that you have some tools to understand how we can fulfill this responsibility. However, I would invite you to continue to explore child safeguarding issues and to put relevant procedures and policy in your own context.